So today we are going to be. It's just going to be me and Siling and other host Jarrett, and we're going to be going over some character building for him. Mostly his character's past. It's mostly just going to be us going back and forth, without much in the way of dice. Just getting a feel for who his character is, where he came from. So Jarrett, would you like to introduce your character?
Yes, the character I'm playing in this game is named Niko Welter. He is mechanically a lunar, I believe, full moon.
Mm-hmm.
And he was born in the West, which, given some of the setting modifications we've made, is actually a bit of a big deal. Because, see, in lore, just before the campaign starts, a wild hunt was done on the West to basically beat back the wild and the Fae and reclaim the West as a place that isn't just chaos, and it was successful. And they found that somehow there was a collection of islands called Wavecrest that had survived and not been taken over by the Fae. And that's where Niko had spent most of his life. The revelation that the Blessed Isle had survived and that it even exists anymore was quite a big deal in his community, like, because he was born in a place called Woodwall, and it was located somewhere around somewhere in Wavecrest.
Okay. So you're Niko Welters from the city of Woodwall, faring from the Wavecrest archipelago. So, young Niko, how would you describe your daily life as, say, a child who's old enough to get around? You know, we don't have to go like super far back to like young childhood, but once your parents are able to give you tasks and trust you to go off on your own, about how would you describe your life? Like,
His childhood, from his perspective, was fairly happy. It was one of those situations where, given the conditions of his village, he probably was a lot more okay with it than he probably should have been. Like, he didn't know a lot of the stuff that was going on in his village, and he was mostly kept in somewhat levels of ignorance about it. So he had like a fairly happy childhood. He had friends, and like his mother Jinka was very supportive of him and cared about him. Uh, a fairly idyllic childhood, are all things considered.
okay. Did something happen to suddenly change that?
Yeah. See, long ago there was a man who ruled in this village, and he was something of a tyrant. And as people do, he eventually died. But when he died, a god came down from heaven and sort of filled the role he had took and became very directly ruling the village. He was the one that basically became its mayor, for lack of a better word. And this man was named Iron Rain Falls Hardest. And he was, as far as gods go, he was fairly tyrannical. He would ask for much more than would be reasonable, and he would deliver incredibly harsh punishments to people who can't. And functionally, one day, Niko was witness to a beating in the middle of the street by this god of one of the villagers. And it sort of changed the tone of this place. As once he realized that, he started to pick up on some of the more darker things in the city that generally people didn't talk to kids about. Like he started to become aware that this city was kind of run by a tyrant.
How do you think his parents reacted to that? To him knowing? Like, did they continue to try to hide it? Or, well, I
Well,
guess his mother. His father died before he was born, correct?
yeah, he died in a war of some type.
Hmm.
His mother probably would have, if not told him everything, would have at least made him aware of what happened, because at that point, keeping him in ignorance would only risk endangering him. So she probably would have given him an abridged understanding of why things were like this, and why no one hasn't just, shanked the guy or something. Like, she's probably explained that he's a god and he's a lot stronger than any of the people here, and he has a lot of cultural power and stuff, and explained it in a way a child could understand.
Of course. Does he wonder who his dad was?
He's been told about him. Jinka generally spoke positively of him. And yes, he never really had any male role models or father figures in his life, so there's sort of a void there that exists.
Okay. What did Niko look forward to? Like, it could be a certain day of the week. It could be a holiday that happened once a year. Like some people really look forward to like Christmas, or some people really look forward to Halloween. Was there anything in particular that Niko, either as a child, maybe even still as an adult, just looked forward to, just in the back of their mind, like, man, I can't wait for this to happen again?
Yeah, in the village he lived in, there was a type of tree that would only bloom and grow fruit for one day of the year. So, like, most of the year it would just be a normal tree, but on one specific day, it would grow these fruit that they were basically, like, so sweet, they were like candy. And it was this big event that a lot of the children of the village would get excited about, and it's something he's, like, yeah, it's something that he's nostalgic for, and especially since he's now left there, it's not something that's going to happen while he's not there. So it's something he can't experience when he's away from.
Okay, that's a little sad. That'll give you something to.
Yeah, like that day kind of brings just a little bit of homesickness for him, because that was like one of the big holidays when he was a child. It was the village's equivalent of Halloween.
Okay. Excuse me. Why did he leave?
He left because one day in the village, men came from across the seas. They wear strange clothing, and they spoke a strange language. Though once the villagers started speaking to them, they seemed to flick over to speaking our tongue in the south, in the west. And they had asked to stay the night in one of our houses, and my mother, being very kind and very accommodating to people, offered to let one of them stay in our house. And while they were there, they told us the story about the realm and about the Blessed Isle, this holy land held by the champions of the earth, that there they had conquered it and made it their own, and the gods there were kept in check and did their jobs and didn't abuse their power. And this sort of spoke to Niko. He was getting old enough where it was time for him to find his place in the world. He was a man now within their culture, and he was looking for something to do, a cause to believe in, and this was the perfect one. It spoke to him, and he asked his mother if he could go with these men to the Blessed Isle and learn of their faith, their immaculate faith. And the men agreed, and with some prompting, and I imagine it was quite a, tearful farewell and stuff, he also got his mother's blessing to leave. And there was one other thing, though. Before he could leave, he had to ask the permission of Iron Rain Falls Hardest. Iron Rain Falls Hardest knew of the Immaculate Faith. He knew of the power they had, and he knew that if he upset a bunch of Immaculate Faithfuls, it probably wouldn't, but it could lead to a dragon-blooded showing up, and he did not want to deal with the Chosen. So he was in a pickle. If he just let Niko leave, it would look weak, and it might damage his position not just here, but also with other local gods and in the celestial bureaucracy as a whole. And if he forced me to stay, he would look like a tyrant and would probably force the hand of the Immaculate Faith, or at the very least would make them more suspicious of him. So he sort of found a centerfold. He would allow me to leave, but in order to do so, he forced Niko to get a brand of his holy symbol on his right hand.
Do you know what that holy symbol looks like?
Yeah, the holy symbol is it's like a teardrop, but it's specifically designed to look more aggressive, and like it's like a series of teardrops that are shaped so it implies that they're falling incredibly quickly. Like they're aligned in like a V, like multiple teardrops.
Okay. So, in the future, we'll come back to that scene. I want to save that scene for a while. I want you and I to really kind of dwell on what that experience really meant to him, and then in the future we will come back and we'll look at that scene and we'll play through it.
Yeah.
But for now, I want to move forward. You left across the sea. What was that trip like to you, or what was that trip like for Niko, going across the impossibly large Western Ocean?
It changed Niko a little bit. The Immaculate Faithfuls there taught him a lot about the world and about the place they were going to, and he saw a lot of things.
I mean, like literally the trip, like just getting to the Blessed Isle.
Yeah, just getting there.
Okay.
Like just on the trip, he learned a lot, and he saw insane things. Like he saw water that was solid, and he saw sea monsters that he would have thought would have completely prevented a group of people from getting through, but somehow the Immaculate Faithfuls knew how to sail the ship, and they had a skilled crew with them. And given that this was an expedition for a wild hunt, there was a Prince of the Earth there who was capable of protecting them and making sure that they survived the trip back to the Blessed Isle. And yeah, that was generally his experience. It wasn't necessarily super safe, but it also wasn't fraught with hardships either. It was more of a learning experience for him than anything.
Who was the first Prince of Earth that you met, and how did they treat Niko?
The first Prince of the Earth that I met was...
Yeah. Do you have a story about him?
Yeah, I
Okay.
do. He was a fire aspect, or more accurately, he just really had a dominant fire side, and he was this very assertive and boisterous person. He ate a lot, and he fought hard, and he was very just enthusiastic about life and the world. And Niko kind of imprinted on that. He really respected the way that this person acted. They were a hero. He saw this man rip apart a sea monster like it was nothing. It was amazing to him that there were people like this, that there was someone this powerful that just walking around. And he got to stay with this person for several months, and this person offered to recommend him to one of the more higher end training schools for the Immaculate Faith, because this dragon-blooded saw something in Niko.
Do you have a name for this dragon-blooded?
Okay.
I can give them a name if you don't.
Yeah, give them a name, because I'm bad at making realm names.
Cessus Aline.
Yep, that sounds perfect. So yeah, that was his first encounter, and it gave him, I'm not going to say a bias, but it made him as a person, he really likes Princes of the Earth. I'll be honest, probably to a naive level, like, he knows that they can be evil and do bad things, but he's probably, in any interactions, he's always going to look at Princes of the Earth in a more friendly light, because he sort of imprints his first experience with them on all of them, because this guy was like, he was the perfect example of what a hero should be. Like he was a really inspiring person, and it sort of it's sort of like Niko's personal hero.
Okay. I may have Cessus Aline show up in the future. So we fast forward. You've spent several months with Cessus Aline on the oceans. When you finally arrive in the Blessed Isle, what Is there any one thing that Niko remembers from that first time of seeing that much land? Because remember, this is the first time he's ever seen a continent before.
Sense of complete wonder. Like, he might as well be going to Yushan with how he views this. This is a place where wonders exist, and people can realign theurgic ley lines because they have access to such power and skill, and there's all of this wealth and artifacts flowing, and this culture's intermingling, and there's all of this information, knowledge, and Niko is just... he's kind of overwhelmed. There's just so much here. Like he came from a small village. There was 50, 60 people, and he knew all of them. And now he walks into a city, and there's millions of people in just this city. And so he doesn't fully know how to interpret all of it. And so mostly it's just all this awe and just like sort of shock that something like this could exist. Like the elemental pole of Earth and that giant mountain that you can see pretty much anywhere in the Blessed Isle. Like, the idea that something that big can even exist is sort of just incredibly fascinating to him and like wonder-inspiring. And he sees that the gods here aren't necessarily servile, because the gods here are respected, but they're also much less corrupt than the gods he's used to, and they work with the dragon-blooded and vice versa. And he sees, like, just this... The society isn't perfect. It has its problems and stuff, but it's such a wonderful place, and a place so full of amazing things that it sort of blindsides him.
What is the name of the first city that you arrived in on the Blessed Isle? Like the port city?
The first city.
Do you have a name?
I'll be honest, I don't know any of the names of the cities in the Blessed Isle.
That's okay.
I have no idea. Where would it make sense for me to show up?
Hey
first?
man, you know my saying, everything else is fanfic. This is the only canon that matters.
Okay,
I could open
how
a book,
about
but
Port Dane?
Port Dane? D-A-N-E?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay, so Port Gain? Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Okay. So you arrive at Port Gain. What, about what season do you think it would be?
Ooh, I'm gonna say spring. Or five... I don't know how the calendar works in Exalted.
That's okay.
The spring equivalent.
Yeah, so, okay, I'll say that you arrived during Resplendent Water. And once I...
Yeah,
I have too many sheets
and
open.
I presume that he's probably, while he's there, he's going to have some of the Immaculates teaching him how to speak their language to an extent, because when he first shows up, he can only speak West tongue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're definitely accommodating with that. One of your tutors, like several of the people there can speak it at least well enough to communicate with you, but they really throw you in the deep end. Like, you are expected to learn the realm tongue, and so only one of your tutors is allowed to speak Western tongue. And
oh god, I forgot this is the realm. Okay. Niko is partially because he's curious about the language, and partially because he doesn't want to disappoint people. He's going to try and as ravenously as he can figure out how to speak the bloody language. He's
your tutor's name is Tabintel. I'm also writing all of these on the sheet as well.
Yeah,
so you can keep up. So Tabintel spent a lot of time with you, and they are a monk in the Immaculate Order. Their name has a bit of a short story to it, where they couldn't keep a secret. Tabin was their given name, but in place of their family name, when they were given their official robes and belt, they were given the surname of Tell. because that's what they're good at. And so this is they're being asked to basically be other people's voice for you is almost a little bit of a backhanded compliment to the fact that they also have learned how to speak many languages.
Okay, that makes sense.
They're fluent in. I should say she is fluent in West as well as Air Tongue and Realm, well enough to teach others, and of course the Old Realm speech, which is used to mostly by the gods.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
If you want to have learned any of those other languages, she would have been happy to teach you those as well.
He, I'm gonna say it's not that he isn't interested in them. It's that once he learns Realm Tongue, like Realm Speech, he's probably going to want to start learning more about the Immaculate Faith specifically than start learning, like, various other languages. Though he probably would show enough interest to, like, make it clear that he isn't just not interested, it's that he has all this stuff he's trying to learn right now.
That's okay, she's understanding. She will teach you, she'll basically make you learn enough to get by in those languages. Like, Niko will know enough Old Realm to do basic communication. You know, like I go store, that kind of stuff when talking to a god.
Okay.
So he'll look like an idiot to the gods, but he'll know enough to know if a god is talking about him in his presence and being rude about it. She'll teach you the bad words and things like that, so that he's at least not. The gods can't
Important
just.
when you're being an immaculate faithful.
Yeah,
like, knowing when a god is like shit talking
Yeah,
you right in front of you.
Yeah, they cannot flippantly shame him in his presence. You know, she says like this is important. You should know. You should at least know this much if it ever comes up. You know, assuming that you go forward, because I mean, someday you might also want to follow the faith and take on our ways.
Yeah.
And there, maybe we can slip in character. And she's telling you about that. She just finished like a quick lesson about that. She's taught you the curse word of the day. It could be anything. It doesn't really matter. I mean, we're just going to speak English the whole time and just say when we're speaking a different language because, the only language I know is sign language, and that doesn't carry over to podcasting.
I mean, you could try to explain to the viewers what you're doing with your hands.
I mean, I could, but we don't need to get into that right now. This isn't an ASL podcast, and I don't know enough about the culture to do that. But we slip in to character after you've been there for, what would you say, a few years?
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's a fair place to slip in.
Did he live in a monastery, like away from the cities, or did he live in more of like a? Go ahead.
He probably lives, given him, in a place where he probably wants to live in a place where there's people to be around. Like, he doesn't want to live in a place that's lonely or anything. And he also probably wants to live near somewhere that has access to the information he's digging through.
Wait, what was that again? One more time? Sorry.
He wants to live, like, someplace that's close enough to his religious studies to, like, have easy access to those, but also close enough to just general people so he can actually interact with the people of the realm, because, he's super excited about being here, so he doesn't just want to be somewhere that's clustered off from the general society of people here.
Okay. Let's say that you stayed in a city a little bit further inland, not too far away from the coast. Just the natural slope of the Blessed Isle, at least in this side of it, means that you can still see the ocean from where you are, but you're so far inland, like more further inland than you have ever been. We'll name the city. I'm trying to think of something that isn't just dragony or elementally, but I guess we could just lean into those stereotypes. We'll call it Earth, Dragon, all the way in. City
God.
for now. We can come up with a different name for it later.
Yeah.
Actually, let's call it we'll call it Kukala's Roost.
Oh, okay, that works. Yeah.
It's named after the great dragon that is said to be slumbering under the city itself. And at times the city does actually tremor and quake, and like sometimes like hard enough to be kind of a disaster. But the construction of the city is sturdy enough that even if one of the princes of Earth goes and shows their full wrath, they're not going to damage the structures. It's all fine. It's a lot of like solid marble construction, and some of it, like the most important buildings, are even reinforced with jade, the magical material jade. For listeners who don't know, jade is considered to be a magical and sacred material, and can be alloyed into metals and other materials to create an extremely strong substance. They make weapons and armor out of it, and as I said, sometimes even reinforce their buildings with it. There's a road that leads down rolling hills down towards Port Gain. But Kukala's Roost is a kind of like a passing city. Port Gain is really where most of the trade happens, but merchants coming from inland pass through Kukala's Roost to get to the oceans and move their goods there.
Okay.
Where we cut in is Tab and Tel and you are sitting at the feet of the temple, and a couple of others are around, but their names aren't so important right now. And what Tabin is talking to you about is where do you want to go from here? She says that, Niko, like, where do you want to go after your studies have finished? Like, what do you want to do in this world?
I'll kinda like strokes his chin and thinks for a minute.
Yeah, and the question's out of nowhere too. You're just having a talk, and then she just asks, what do you want to do?
And he kind of goes, I guess where I'll be needed.
I mean, I
have all this training to help with things. I guess I'll find a place that needs an immaculate monk and go and help them and do that. But by the way, his answer is like, because he's the type of he's not actually all that dumb, but this answer is like he's giving an incredibly simple answer here. Like he hasn't thought at all about what he's going to do.
Yeah, she notes that. She says, "Well, that is a very good non-answer, but I mean, really, have you thought about it? I mean, you can't stay here forever. Eventually your tutelage will end, and you'll be expected to do something. You should really consider what you want that to be. What you say where the world needs you. Do you want to be a soldier, or are you waiting for the next wild hunt? We could try to find you somebody to take you under them. I mean, not everybody, even on the Blessed Isle, has had your experience here, and you have a very rare knowledge of the oceans."
And like you can clearly tell now he's actually putting serious thought into it. I guess if I would choose myself, I'd probably put both of my talents to use, but find someone who's traveling to the west and is in need of someone to help deal with the gods there. I know from personal experience the gods in the west are not as, and he kind of pauses as he thinks of the right wording, bull as the gods here in the Blessed Isle. There's a lot of them are incredibly used to having no budging their power at all. So having someone that knows how to deal with them could be incredibly helpful to anyone who's adventuring to the west.
I know a few people who could definitely use somebody like that. And if you would like to go and like leave the Blessed Isle to, venture out and retake some of these places that, frankly, we've lost, then I could help that happen.
That sounds wonderful. Yeah, I like that. That makes sense.
Well, that's all we can hope for in the world, right? we
Yeah.
we could all use a little bit of solid ground to stand on.
Another thing that could help is I understand, especially if anyone's going near the wave crest, I understand how their culture works. I mean, I'm a native, so I could help make sure people don't get hostilities with the people of Wave Crest, because it's possible.
Yes, we've learned a lot from you, especially about Wave Crest and their fragile existence. We're happy that they were still there. When we say fragile, we mean that they are more at the mercy of their gods than we would like. I'd love to send somebody out there, but that's not for me to decide.
Yeah, and he kind of looks down at the brand, which is now a pretty old brand on his hand. Yeah, I think I know more than most about that. Don't worry, ma'am.
So the day continues as normal, and life in general continues. But that conversation sticks with you, and she doesn't really bring it up again. Like, it's almost like she wanted you to know that your time here could not last forever, and you should really try to plan ahead. Now, did you want Niko to have Exalted before he left, or before he met the rest of the party, or did you want him to have that happen while we're playing? Because that is an option.
Okay, what do you think would work the best narratively? We'll Exalt on the trek.
Yeah, I'm not quite ready to go into a heavy metal.
Yeah, because the thing
cover.
is, Exaltations is going to require a very specific, like it needs to be cool. It needs to have a build up. It can't just happen. So, like, we can have that be something that happens in play. Because listeners, once we do these little solo narrative stories we've been telling, we're going to go back to the beginning of the trip and actually tell the story from the beginning versus the sort of in the middle story we told last episode.
Yeah, the how did we get here? Well, here's how you got there. So I think that this could be the beginning of Niko's name being put in as an assistant on a ship. Somebody who's familiar, who has made a voyage out from the far sea or from the far ocean to and made it back to the mainland. And he did pick up a lot while he was on that ship, but like he might be a little bit less experienced in actual shipping matters than might be liked. And so I can see him being put on board somebody's ship. And I think that might be Ark's character. And so when I sit down with Ark, I'll introduce Niko to him, and maybe between now and then I'll ask you a few questions about how you might handle that. But like, you might spend some time on his ship as just a person.
Oh no, that sounds totally cool. Like, when we first start doing our sessions on our ship, I'll just be a person, and then we can exalt in play.
Okay.
And actually have a trigger to cause him to exalt.
Wonderful. Well, listeners, that's been Jarrett's pre-session of his childhood, and we have a few seeds that we'll definitely just use for like flashbacks in the future, and use this to get our running start.
So this has been the Podcast. I've been Jarrett playing Niko, with the DM being Insoling. Thank you all for watching. Bye bye.
Bye bye.